Marcus Ellison was 39 years old the morning he came home to a house that no longer had his name on the mailbox. Someone had taken it down. The adhesive outline of the letters was still there, faintly white against the dark brick, like a ghost of something removed in a hurry. The door was locked with a deadbolt he did not own. The code he had programmed into the keypad 5 years ago returned 3 sharp beeps and a red light. His neighbor, Mrs. Fontaine, stood on her porch in a housecoat and looked away when he caught her eye. He stood on the front walk for a moment. He was wearing his work clothes, a gray jacket, worn boots, a clipboard from a job site meeting 40 minutes earlier. He looked exactly like what she had always believed him to be, a man who worked for other people, a man who drove a 2017 Silverado because it was practical, not because it was a statement. He reached into his inside pocket, not the phone she knew about, the other one. He made one call. It lasted 11 seconds. Then he walked back to his truck and sat down and looked at the front of the house, the wraparound porch he had built himself, the oak double doors he had refinished by hand, the house that his grandfather had helped him close on 12 years ago. 6 months before Marcus ever met Diane Ellison, born Diane Parrish, who had told a family court judge last Tuesday that Marcus had abandoned the family home of his own free will. She had taken the children. She had taken both vehicles, the Silverado and the Lexus she drove. She had filed for emergency custody and emergency possession of the marital residence, and she had done all of this 2 weeks after $287,000 moved out of a joint account and into an account only she controlled, using authorization forms that bore a signature close enough to fool a bank teller, but not close enough to fool a forensic document examiner. What Diane had never thought to ask, not in 7 years of marriage, not in 4 years of dating before that, was whose name had been on the house, the Lexus, and the children's private school tuition since the very beginning. What happened next would cost Diane Parrish Ellison everything she believed she had taken. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. The morning light hit the wraparound porch at an angle Marcus had calculated before he ever poured the concrete footings. He had spent 3 weekends working out the sight lines so that by late autumn the sun would come in just under the eave and warm the boards through most of the morning. That had been 5 years ago. He had built the porch for himself and for whoever would sit on it with him. He had thought, at the time, that it would be Diane. He was a structural engineer by trade, a project manager by title, and a builder by temperament. His firm, Cornerstone Civil, managed infrastructure contracts across 4 states, water systems, municipal roads, the kind of work that didn't have his name on a plaque, because the people who built things the world ran on didn't need plaques. They knew what they built. That was enough. Diane knew about his work the way most people know about plumbing. She knew it existed. She did not know what it moved. His grandmother, Esther Ellison, used to press her hand flat against the wall of her kitchen and say, "Find out what's holding the building up before you decide to leave." He had been 11 years old when she said it, and he hadn't understood it fully until he was 31, watching another man's marriage dissolve in a mediator's office, and thinking he never checked the structure. Marcus had been checking his for 18 months. He had met Diane at a fundraising dinner in Charlotte. She was in nonprofit development, sharp and warm, the kind of woman who worked a room without appearing to. She had a laugh that was real. He had tested it, the way he tested everything, by watching what happened when something stopped being funny. Most people kept laughing out of social reflex. Diane stopped. He had loved that about her. They dated 4 years. They married in a small ceremony in Virginia, both families present, his grandmother in the front row. He had purchased the house 6 months before the wedding, put his name on the deed, and had not added hers. His lawyer at the time, a careful woman named Phyllis Odom, had suggested he think on it. He had thought on it. He had left the deed alone. By the time their son Caleb was born, and their daughter Reese 2 years after, the household ran the way households do, when one person earns quietly and the other manages loudly. Marcus handled the invisible parts. He had been doing that since he was 9 years old, helping his grandmother repair window frames in a house that always needed one more thing fixed. The first sign came in September. A Saturday morning, Diane in the kitchen with her phone angled slightly downward as he came in from the garage. Not casual, not accidental. Practiced. He poured his coffee. He said nothing. He filed it where he filed everything that needed more information before it could mean something. 2 weeks later, he found a bank statement in the printer tray. A new account, opened in August. Solo, her name only. He photographed it, walked back to the kitchen, and refilled his mug. He called Phyllis that afternoon. She said, "Don't touch anything yet. Just watch." He said, "That's what I was planning." He watched. The discovery came in stages, the way damage does. You don't find the rot all at once. You find the first soft board, and then you follow the moisture line, and by the end you understand how far back it started. He found the message thread on a Tuesday night in October. Not on Diane's phone. She had grown careful about that. He found it on the shared family iPad on the kitchen counter. She had logged into a messaging app and forgotten to log out. He clicked the icon while checking the weather. He read for 4 minutes without shifting in his chair. When he finished, he forwarded 3 exchanges to his personal email, screenshot 12 more, and logged out of the app. He placed the iPad back at the angle it had been. He finished checking the weather. His hands did not shake. His face remained perfectly calm. The man's name was Brandon Terrell. Commercial real estate broker. Divorced, South End condo, social media full of volume. Marcus, whose firm had done site assessments on 2 of Terrell's projects, knew what the volume was covering. 2 open creditor judgments. A dissolved LLC. A financial profile built more for appearance than substance. The messages told the story plainly. Diane had been building a timeline. File first. Emergency custody. Emergency possession. Access the joint accounts. Relocate. Before Marcus could respond. She had used the word clean 4 times. She had not been wrong about the logic. She had been wrong about the foundation. Marcus opened his laptop. He pulled up the property records. His name only, as it had been for 12 years. The vehicle registrations. The Silverado. His, the Lexus he had purchased in 2021 as a birthday gift. Registered in his name. Insured under his policy. A gift with paperwork behind it. Because he was an engineer, and engineers kept paperwork. The children's school enrollment contracts. Financial guarantor on both accounts, Marcus Ellison. The school's policy required guarantor authorization for any change to enrollment or custody-related pickup procedures. Diane had updated the emergency contact list in the spring. She had not changed the guarantor because that field did not exist on the form she used. She had assumed it did. She had assumed a great many things. He pulled the bank records next. $287,000 transferred over 9 months in incremental amounts, each below the review threshold. Organized, patient. He almost appreciated the architecture of it. He pulled up his own mortgage closing documents from 2019 and placed them beside the authorization forms. He looked at the signatures. The slope of the M. The gap between first and last name. The pressure across the baseline. Close, not close enough. He made 2 calls. First to Phyllis. Second to a forensic document examiner named Gerald Park, who had testified in 4 federal cases. Marcus told him he needed results in 10 days. Gerald said he'd do his best. Marcus said he'd pay for his best. Gerald said he'd have it in 8. Marcus closed the laptop. He went upstairs. He got into bed beside his wife. She was scrolling on her phone with the screen tilted down. He said goodnight. She said goodnight. He stared at the ceiling for 20 minutes, running calculations. Then he slept. Phyllis Odom's office was on the 14th floor of a building Marcus had helped assess 6 years ago. He sat across from her, and she laid his documentation across the desk the way a surgeon lays out instruments, methodically, with full attention to each piece. She filed using an affidavit, claiming abandonment, Phyllis said. Except you have doorbell camera footage showing her having the locks changed while you were at a job site. Yes, the vehicle she's driving. My name. Has been since purchase. And the house. My deed. Never modified. Phyllis allowed herself a single dry exhale. She walked into family court and claimed possession of a house she has no legal stake in. She looked at the bank documents. The forgery changes the entire nature of this proceeding. This stops being a contested divorce and becomes a criminal matter running alongside the civil one. I want my kids home, Marcus said. That's the only part that matters. Everything else is documentation. She nodded. I'll file for emergency reversal by Friday. With the deed, the vehicle registrations, and the school guarantor contract, I expect the emergency possession order vacated within 72 hours. She paused. Bring me the original deed. Not a copy. I want it in my hands before I file. He reached into his folder and placed it on her desk. She looked at it, then at him. You already knew I'd ask. I brought everything you'd need. I'm an engineer. I don't come to meetings without the load calculations. Real power operated in quiet rooms. His uncle Raymond lived 20 minutes south in a brick house he had paid off in 2003. He was 67, retired, and possessed the specific wisdom that comes from watching other people make avoidable mistakes over a long career. He was on his back porch, sorting seed packets when Marcus arrived. He looked him over and said, "Sit down." Marcus sat. Your grandmother used to say, most people don't lose because they're outmatched. They lose because they stopped paying attention. Raymond set down a packet. You've been paying attention. 18 months, Marcus said. Then let me add something. Raymond looked at him steadily. Carol Parrish came to me 3 months ago. Said Diane had asked her to co-sign on a lease. Said it was just in case. Just a rough patch. Carol didn't sign. But she told me. The timeline goes back at least a year. Maybe more. Marcus was quiet. A cardinal moved through the Japanese maple at the edge of the yard. His grandmother had planted one like it, years ago. She had told him cardinals were proof the world still bothered with beautiful things. She was performing, Marcus said. The whole marriage. Building an exit while I was building everything else. Some men build beautiful things, Raymond said. The best ones know when to stop building for the wrong people. That evening, Marcus made dinner. He had picked Caleb and Reese up from school, per the temporary order Phyllis had already filed, in response to the emergency custody claim, a response Diane's attorney had not anticipated. He made pasta. He helped Reese with her reading. He listened to Caleb explain, at length, a soccer disagreement at recess. He did all of this with the same steady attention he brought to every project that mattered to him. Diane came by to collect some of her things. She rang the doorbell of her own alleged residence. He opened the door. She looked past him into the house. The tile floors he had laid. The porch he had built. The oak doors he had refinished, as if calculating how much time she had left inside it. She looked at him. Whatever she was searching for, she did not find it. She left. He closed the door. He did not watch her go. Some things you don't say. Gerald Park delivered his report in 7 days. He walked through his findings in Phyllis's conference room without ceremony. 3 signatures on the bank authorization forms were not Marcus's. 2 were close enough for routine inspection. 1 had been executed at a 7-degree slope inconsistent with Marcus's documented signing history across 42 reference documents going back to his first mortgage. That last one, the authorization for the largest single transfer, $94,000 in a single movement, bore a pressure pattern so distinct from Marcus's natural hand that Gerald had flagged it within the first hour of his review. "If this goes to the DA," Gerald said, gathering his materials, "the state will retain their own examiner. Mine will hold up. I've been cross-examined 21 times." After Gerald left, Phyllis turned to Marcus. "The bank has already flagged the transfers pending our documentation request. They're cooperating fully. The criminal referral is a matter of when, not if." She paused. "There is one more thing. Brandon Terrell co-signed on the new lease Diane signed in September. His signature is on record. That places him as a knowing participant in the planned relocation." She let that sit. "Which means the criminal conversation is not limited to Diane." Marcus absorbed this without visible reaction. He looked at the stack on the table. The deed, vehicle registrations, school contracts, Gerald's report, the bank's cooperation letter, the lease with Terrell's name on it, his grandmother's handwriting on a document from 1989, the original purchase record of a different house in a different city, proof that in his family the habit of keeping paperwork went back at least 2 generations. He had inherited both the instinct and the discipline. "What do you want from the civil proceedings?" Phyllis asked. "Return of the $287,000 plus legal fees," he said. "Full custody with reasonable visitation. The house, the vehicles, and I want the record to reflect clearly what happened, so it can't be done to someone who can't document it the way I could." Phyllis wrote it down. She did not look surprised by any of it. Preparation is the work. The hearing was on a Thursday morning in a conference room adjoining Judge Miriam Cole's courtroom. Diane arrived with her attorney Stanton, who had filed the original emergency orders and was now, Marcus suspected, privately recalibrating what he had walked into. Diane's mother, Carol Parrish, sat along the wall and did not look at her daughter. Stanton opened by restating Diane's position. The marriage had deteriorated. Marcus had been emotionally absent. She had acted to protect the children. He used the word protect 4 times. He did not mention the deed, the registrations, or the bank authorization forms. He was working from a script written before he knew what was in the folder. Phyllis waited. Then she placed the certified deed on the table and slid it to Stanton. "The property at 4418 Willowbrook Drive has been solely owned by Marcus Ellison since 2011. The petitioner's name has never appeared on this document." She paused 1 beat. Not once. The room shifted. Stanton looked at the deed the way you look at a load-bearing wall that has been removed, with the specific dread of understanding what is about to fall. Phyllis continued. "The vehicle registrations, the school guarantor contract, Gerald Park's findings, summarized in 3 clean paragraphs, the bank's cooperation letter." Each document laid on the table in sequence. Diane sat very still. Marcus had known her for 11 years. He had watched her face in every configuration. What he saw now was none of them. It was the expression of someone who had been standing on what they believed was solid ground and had just felt it speak. She looked across the table at him. "You knew," she said. "Small." "I knew," he said. "I've known for a long time." She looked at the deed, at the registration for the car she was currently driving, at the school contract her children were enrolled under. 11 years of marriage in her name was not on the deed of the house she had tried to take. The car was not hers. The school was controlled by the man she had tried to cut out. The bank account she had emptied was now the subject of a criminal investigation. The timeline she had spent 14 months building had been constructed on a foundation she had never once verified. She turned to her mother. Carol Parrish looked back with the expression of a woman who had tried to warn someone and had not been listened to. Stanton made one last effort, suggested the deed question was a civil matter, that the criminal issue was separate, that perhaps a continuance. Phyllis stopped him with 2 sentences. The emergency custody order was obtained through a material misrepresentation of the property status. The respondent requests immediate reinstatement of the original custody arrangement. Judge Cole looked at the deed, then the bank letter, then both attorneys. Motion granted. Emergency custody order vacated. Children are to be returned to the primary residence by 5 o'clock this afternoon. She removed her reading glasses. This court notes for the record a particular interest in how those authorization forms will look to the district attorney. Diane said, "I just wanted," and stopped. Whatever she had wanted, the sentence had no ending that helped her. Marcus gathered his documents. He stood. "I built that house," he said quietly. Not to the room. To Diane. "I laid the tile. I poured the footings for the porch. I hung the doors. I did all of that before you moved in, and I kept doing it after. You lived in something I built, and never once checked what it was standing on." He picked up his jacket. "You picked the wrong man to build against. I know how to build things that last." He walked to the door. He did not look back. 9 months later, Marcus stood on the wraparound porch in the early morning, a coffee mug in both hands, watching the light come in at the angle he had planned for. The Japanese maple along the walk was putting out new growth. Caleb was asleep upstairs. Reese had climbed into his bed at 6 and fallen back asleep against his shoulder, which had delayed him getting up, which he did not mind. The Cornerstone Civil portfolio had expanded in the fall. A water project in Virginia Beach, a bridge contract in Memphis. He had brought on 2 new engineers and promoted Sylvia, his longest tenured project manager, who had been quietly running half the operations for 2 years and had earned the title. He had been planning the expansion for 18 months, waiting for the current complications to resolve. They had. He had met Renee at Sylvia's promotion dinner in November. She was a civil attorney who worked in infrastructure law, easements and municipal contracts, not courtrooms. She had asked him what he thought was the hardest part of building something meant to last. He had thought about it honestly and said, knowing the difference between a structural problem and a cosmetic one. She had nodded as if the answer made sense. She asked good questions. She did not perform for him. By March, she had keys to the house, and the children had decided she was acceptable, which was the only vote that mattered. As for Diane, he heard about her the way he heard about everything that was no longer his problem. Brandon Terrell's brokerage had ended his contract 6 weeks after the court filings became public record, as tended to happen in a city where reputation was a working asset. He had relocated to Atlanta. His LLC carried another judgment. Diane was working in marketing for a regional staffing firm. Her professional license in nonprofit development, which required a clean background check, had not been reinstated. The DA had levied 2 criminal counts. She had pleaded to 1, with full restitution. The $287,000 was being returned incrementally over 4 years. Her mother had not spoken to her since the hearing. Her former best friend had quietly moved on. The social cost was total. Marcus had not gloated. He had noted it and moved on. Bitterness required ongoing emotional investment in people who no longer deserved it. The morning came in full now, the light warming the boards he had laid himself. A cardinal moved through the Japanese maple, without urgency, without an audience, doing what it did, because that was what it did. Caleb's voice drifted down from an upstairs window. "Dad, Reese is awake." "I know," Marcus called back. "Come on down." He heard their feet on the stairs. Reese's lighter, quicker. Caleb's deliberate, heel first. The way Marcus walked. He had built this house before he ever knew them. He would keep building it for as long as there was something worth building. He was free. He was solvent. He was unbothered. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.